Welcome to Sunday Sermons from the Williamsburg Community Chapel, brought to you by the Chapel Podcast Network. Let's grab our Bibles and open up to the book of Genesis, chapter 11, verses 1 through 9. And I'll read the first 4 verses for us now as we prepare to hear from lead pastor Travis Simone as he helps us continue in our sermon series titled, The Causes of Exile. Now the whole earth had one language and the same words. And as people migrated from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. And they said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly." And they had brick for stone and bitumen for mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens. And let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth."
I had the privilege of taking a sabbatical this year. And part of that sabbatical I got to spend in Durham, North Carolina, on the campus of Duke University. And one of my goals for this sabbatical was to deepen my prayer life. And I thought, while I get fit spiritually and deepen my prayer life, I should also attempt to get fit physically and deepen my engagement with an exercise routine. And so I set off on one of my first days in Durham to the Duke University Rec Center, and I did more push-ups and sit-ups than I had done in a very long time, and I felt great about myself. Only to wake up the next morning and not feel so great about myself. But I thought, I must go back. I was so sore. Every part of my body felt tenderized, like it had been put through a meat grinder. I thought, I have got to go back. This is how it works. You break up the muscle fiber. It will build back stronger. You break it up again. And so I go back to the rec center and I attempt to do more push-ups and sit-ups. And as I am doing these sit-ups, I am simultaneously in pain and giggling. My stomach is just so tender, yet it hurts so bad. And I was doubled over in pain and also kind of laughing. And this college girl comes up to me and says, "Sir," which I thought was funny, by the way. Oh no, I got the sir in the college rec center. "Sir, are you okay?" Now, every man in this room knows my response. I'm fine. You don't look fine. You don't seem fine, but every man knows you're never saying to a college girl, "You're not fine." You're always fine. "I'm doing great. How about you?" So I keep going, and the same girl comes back up to me and she says, "Sir, if you need help, I can go get help for you." She says to me, she says, "They have medicine at the front desk." That's what she said to me. To which I respond, and every man knows my response, "I don't need any help." You see, our pride always keeps us from telling the truth. Our pride keeps us from facing the truth. And our pride keeps us from knowing the truth. And pride becomes especially dangerous for people living in exile. You see, we began our annual teaching focus by telling the story of exile. That in 586 BC, the king of Babylon broke through the walls of Jerusalem, rounded up its few remaining residents, and exiled them to Babylon. One key detail in the story that I want to make sure we remember from those first few weeks is that the king flees the city through a garden. This serves as a reminder to the reader of humanity's original home, the Garden of Eden. You see, the exile to Babylon is emblematic of humanity's exile from our true home. We all live east of Eden, and a cosmic sense of homelessness pervades our lives. This fall, we're studying the causes of our exile. That at some point, we all ask ourselves, how did I get here? Or I love how Rich put it in the first week, not just of the first week of this series, not just how did I get here, but how did I get here again? We've learned that our sin sends us into exile, and that sin is a predator that feeds on anger and dejection. And now this morning we come to the story of a people who sought to make a name for themselves, only to end up being named confusion. They sought to make a name for themselves, and they end up being named confusion. You see, pride and exile are a combustible combination, because pride blinds us to the only way out of exile. Pride blinds us to the only way out of exile. And what we'll see in this story of people who sought to make a name for themselves but ended up being named confusion, we'll see a picture of pride. We'll see the problem of pride. We'll see the pain of pride. And ultimately, we'll see the solution for pride. First, the picture of pride. Look at verses 1 through 4 with me again. Now, the whole earth had one language and the same words. And as people migrated from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. And they said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly." And they had brick for stone and bitumen, which is a word for tar, bitumen for mortar. They said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth." These 4 verses paint an extraordinarily vivid picture of pride. First, they find this plain in Shinar, which is actually the land of Babylon. It's highly suggestive of the future exile to Babylon. In fact, as you read this story, what you should know is the Hebrew word for Babel and the Hebrew word for Babylon is the same word. No difference. Same word in Hebrew, Babel and Babylon. This story in Genesis anticipates the future exile to Babylon. And they settle there in Babylon. And what's interesting about the fact that they settled is, remember the very first command that God gave to creation. His first command was not a negative command, do not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. His first command was a positive command. Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. That was the mandate God gave humanity at the dawn of creation. Be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth. And here, humanity says, nope, we're not going to do that. We're tired of living in exile. We're tired of moving east. We're tired of filling the earth. We are going to settle here. The first picture of pride is disobedience to God's command in creation. Second picture of pride is brick for stone and bitumen or tar for mortar. See, stone was heavy. Bricks could be made lighter. At some point, a stone tower gets too tall. You can't keep stacking the stone on top of itself. But if you have bricks that are lighter, if you have a substance that will glue them together, they think, we have created a technological innovation. Up till now, people only built with stone, and we're gonna outdo them. We're so smart. They used stone. They didn't have anything to bind the stone together. We've got bricks. We've got mortar. Technological innovation, check mark for us. The next picture of pride, let us, times 3. They say, let us make bricks. They say, let us make bricks. Then they say, let us build for ourselves for a city. Then they say, let us make a name for ourselves. You know, the last person to say, let us, who that was God. In Genesis chapter 1, let us make humanity. Let us, God says. And now here they go, let us. They are attempting to take the place of God in their own lives. And if you think I'm making too much of that, the Hebrew word for a tower whose top is in the heavens, the word for top, it's the Hebrew word for head. We're gonna make a tower that has a head in the heavens. It's a picture of they are now trying to recreate humanity in their image, after their likeness. A city was a place of protection. God has failed to protect us. We now are going to protect ourselves. And the top, the head of this tower, guess where it's gonna be? It's gonna be in the heavens. We're gonna get out of this mess on our own. This picture of pride is summed up perfectly with the phrase, let us make a name for ourselves. See, name in the Bible always relates to identity. What they are saying is, let us construct our own identity. Let us make a name for ourselves. And here's the truth. Here's the problem of pride. The problem of pride is we all want to make a name for ourselves. That's the problem. We try to make our name for ourselves through the obsessive pursuit of more money, more relationships, more houses, more awards, more trips, more political victories. We try to make a name for ourselves by securing our legacy in the community, in our families, at our alma maters. Here's a question. Why is no building at that college down the street simply called Building A? Someone wanted to make a name for themselves. And we all want to make a name for ourselves. This picture of pride blinds us to the only way out of exile. We think if we can just get the tower tall enough, if we can just get the city secure enough, if we can just abandon the commands of God brazenly enough or construct our identity clear enough, then we'll find our way home. Pride blinds us to the only way out of exile. That's the picture of pride. Now we get in verse 5, the problem of pride. And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of man had built. It's quite the irony that they built a tower they believed that was soaring into the heavens. And God says, well, I better come down to see it. God on his heavenly throne can't even see the minuscule tower that they have built. The Lord must come down to even catch a glimpse of this thing. It turns out that they were not quite as good at tower building as they thought. You see, the problem of pride is that we all want to make a name for ourselves, and we can't make a name for ourselves. That's the problem of pride. we can't make a name for ourselves. They were not as smart as they thought they were. In the beginning of the passage where it says they had one language, it says now the whole earth had one language and the same words. The literal Hebrew there is they had one lip and they had one word. It's not that they had the same language, the author is saying. They had a minimal capacity for language, one word, and you see it play out again and again in the story. They don't make bricks in the original text. They brick bricks. And they don't burn them thoroughly in the original story. They burn them. The author is highlighting this fact that they're just not very smart. They brick bricks, they burn them. They're not as smart as they thought they were. Again, spending some time on the campus of Duke University, I encountered some interesting things. In the dining hall, I'm always interested in seeing what's going on there out in the world. Dining hall at Duke is quite the feast. I did enjoy eating there often. But this always made me laugh. On the water machine, hot water is hot. Now this is present at a school that had in 2024, for their undergraduate college, a 5% acceptance rate. Out of every 100 people that apply to go there, they take 5 of them. And those 5 geniuses had to be told, hot water is hot. And it even gets worse. There was further instruction. Beyond hot water is hot, there was further instruction. For hot water, please use only cups made for hot water. Again, a lot of instruction for the kids who got 1,600 on their SATs. See, the people in Babel, they weren't as smart as they thought they were. And the truth is, we are not as smart as we think we are. And deep down, we all know it. The truth is, the tower builders were not only motivated by lots of pride, their pride was tinged with fear. Look at verse 4. Lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth. That's their motivation. Lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth. They're anxious. They're afraid of what could happen if they spread out from each other. It's a hunker down mentality, or as we've put it in our series here, it's a flee from exile kind of response. You see, human pride is confidence misplaced. And pride is even more insidious than we realize. Because our pride, so often at the root of it, is our fear in our own inadequacy. And yet we still with gusto say, I'm gonna build that tower. Let me ask you this. In what tower building project have you misplaced your confidence? In what tower building project have you misplaced your confidence? And maybe a corollary question, what fear drives you to make your name great? Psalm 127 says this, unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchman stays awake in vain. It is in vain that you rise up early and go late to rest, eating the bread of anxious toil. The problem of pride is that we all want to make a name for ourselves, and we can't make a name for ourselves. pride, and fear blind us to the only way out of our exile. And I want to press a little harder on this problem of pride. I could transition to my last point about the solution now, but I want to go a little deeper on the problem, and I'll call this the pain of pride. You see, the very thing that the people wanted to avoid is exactly what happened to them. Look at verses 8 and 9. So the Lord dispersed them from there over the face of all the earth, and they left off the building of the city. Therefore its name was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of all the earth. And from there the Lord dispersed them over the face of all the earth. 2 times, dispersed. What did they fear? They feared getting dispersed. The very thing they wanted to avoid is exactly what happened to them. Remember, they wanted to make a name for themselves. And they made a name for themselves, all right. The name that they made for themselves was confused. That's the name that they made. And the Hebrew word for confused rhymes with the Hebrew word for fool. And I think the author is pointing you in that direction. They wanted to make a name, and they are named, and the name is confused fool. You see, the pain of pride is not just that we want to make a name for ourselves and we can't make a name for ourselves. It's that we make the wrong name for ourselves. Now, through great literary artistry, the author here demonstrates that the pain that our pride eventually yields is deeply embedded in the very plans that we have to make a name for ourselves. Let me just say that again. There's some beautiful literary artistry here that reveals the pain our pride eventually yields is deeply embedded in our plans to make a name for ourselves. You see, the Hebrew word for bricks, that's what they were going to use to build the tower. And the Hebrew word for confused, which is what sounds like Babel, it's the same letters, just in reverse order. The Hebrew word for bricks and the Hebrew word for confused, same letter, reverse order. That's kind of an interesting, biblical observation. It's totally intentional by the author to say that the seeds of their confusion are present in the very plan to make a name for themselves. And here's my caution. Here's my buyer beware moment for all of us. Wherever it is in your life that you're trying to make a name for yourself, God might just come down and confuse that part of your life. The very place where you are trying to get the most secure, that's the place that often God comes and scrambles. The outcome you fear is the outcome God may bring to pass. Now, my hunch is that anyone over the age of 25 has already experienced that. And so I want to make sure I also highlight God's grace in the midst of judgment. We've been doing that in each of the sermons on the causes of exile. Here's a quote from a great Old Testament scholar named Brent Strawn. He's preached here a couple of times. He said this when writing about Genesis 11. Make no mistake, God's judgment here is lined with grace. In scattering the people, their fears are realized, yes, but they are also enabled and empowered to obey God's creational command. And remember the creational command, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth. And I want to talk more about this next week, but exile, strangely enough, is both judgment and opportunity for faithfulness within our judgment. Faithfulness within the places to which God sends us to exile. You see, pride blinds us to the only way out of exile. And so God uses the pain of our pride to open our eyes, to remove the scales, and to show us the way home. So what is the solution for pride? Well, in ancient Greek literature, authors placed their most important ideas at the very beginning. You want to know what the Iliad is about? The first line says, "Rage, rage, the rage of Achilles." It's about anger. It's about rage. It's about battle. In English literature, authors often place their most important ideas at the end of a book. Usually there's a scene that brings it all together. And you go, aha, that's what the author was intending all along. In ancient Hebrew, the crucial concept is often hidden like a treasure in the center of the story. That's often how Hebrew literature works. It's a treasure hidden at the center. Now, I'm glad the scripture is printed on everyone's bulletin. I want you to look at your bulletin. You're going to see 9 verses, which means the center is verse 5. There are 4 verses before verse 5. There are 4 verses after verse 5. Verse 5, this is the treasure that the author has hidden at the center of the passage. What is the solution for pride? And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower, which the children of man had built. For a people who want to make a name for themselves, can't make a name for themselves, and ultimately make the wrong name for themselves, the Lord came down. That's the solution. We can't get back into the garden. We can't find our way home. We can't build a tower tall enough to reach into heaven. So God came down to us in the person of Jesus Christ. I want you to consider 3 verses this morning to demonstrate what it means that God came down in the person of Jesus Christ. First, from John 12, this is Jesus on his way to the cross, turning toward Jerusalem. He says, "Now my soul is troubled, and what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour, but for this very purpose I have come to this hour. Father, glorify your name." You see, on the cross, Jesus gave up his name. Jesus didn't come to make his name great. He came to give up his name, to make the name of the Father great. On the cross, Jesus gave up his name. And then through the resurrection, Jesus receives the ultimate name. Philippians chapter 2, therefore God has highly exalted him and bestowed upon him the name that is above every name. Now here's the payoff. The only way out of exile is to then receive Jesus's name. Look at Revelation 22. This is the last chapter of the Bible. This is the moment when humanity re-enters their true home. Then the angel showed me the river of the water of life, bright as crystal, flowing from the throne of God. And the Lamb, flowing from the throne of God and of the Lamb, through the middle of the street of the city. Also on either side of the river, the tree of life, just like in the Garden of Eden. The tree of life is there. The throne of God and the Lamb will be in it, and his servants will worship him. They will see his face, and his name will be on their foreheads. This is the picture of our true home. And the only people who make it home are those who stopped trying to make a name for themselves Again, the ones who make it home are those who by faith trusted in the name, the identity of Jesus Christ, and in doing so received his name. The solution for pride? Invite God to come down into your life. Stop making a name for yourself. Receive Jesus' name. It's the only solution for pride. See, the good news of the gospel is this. Though we all want to make a name for ourselves, and we can't make a name for ourselves. In fact, we often make the wrong name for ourselves. Right now, this morning, you can stop striving to make a name for yourself because Jesus Christ stands ready to give you his name. And it's the name above all names. Don't let pride blind you to the only way out of exile.
Thank you for joining us today. Here at the Williamsburg Community Chapel, we are all about making disciples of Jesus Christ. So wherever you are on your spiritual journey, we hope you will join us this year as we study the biblical theme of exile and learn how to sing the Lord's song in a foreign land.